Well, hello everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Wellbeing Wire. Today I'm joined by James Wright from the Frank Bruno Foundation. James has been in the world of mental health and fitness for over 25 years. He's a qualified social worker and has qualifications in exercise, fitness and nutrition. So he's ideally placed to talk to us about the subject at hand today, and that is around the benefits to our well-being generally and also mental well-being from the world of boxing. So James, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me on. Looking forward to this.
Brilliant. Thanks for agreeing to come on. I mean, for those of listeners that don't know what the Frank Bruno Foundation is, James, can you just give everyone a bit of an overview of why the Frank Bruno Foundation exists?
Okay, so we've had our centre here in Northampton running now for 2 years, although the charity's been in essence for about 4 or 5 now, but obviously with COVID and delays, we opened our doors in Northampton in our first centre 2 years ago. And we are a charity based on the view that our boss, the former heavyweight champion of the world, Frank Bruno, wanted to give something back to the community based on his experiences, his values, and his views on mental health. Frank's battles and stories with mental health are very well documented, and Frank shares them very openly himself, and was probably one of the first celebrities as such to come out with such public battles with mental health. So the foundation here is set up. We deliver programs and workshops around fitness, exercise, non-contact boxing, and then different subject matters, which is very much on a holistic based view on mental well-being and positive mental health well-being, such as, good nutrition. How do we manage anxiety? What actually is mental health? Understanding mental health. That, I joked with you prior to this that 20 years ago when I said I worked in mental health, people thought I worked in Silence of the Lambs. Today's world, we have young people self-diagnose themselves because TikTok tells them diagnosis that they have. So we try and deliver the understanding around mental health in a very holistic approach and view with workshops that enables individuals to have more tools in life to support them with their mental health.
As soon as I hear the word holistic, my ears always prick up, because I think that's where we're going wrong in society. We're not thinking holistically about things. I think there are so many things that we can bring into our health interventions that are proactive, things that prevent things going wrong in the first place. Exercise, getting a diet right can prevent so many of these metabolic health issues that we're seeing in society. Yeah. So yeah, I think you and I are definitely on the same page if we're thinking holistically. So James, when I read Frank Bruno's book, I read one called "Let Me Be Frank," and it talked about his challenges that he had with being sectioned, and I think it happened on a number of occasions, and the medication and things like that. So we talked before we came on air about Frank's views on medication, and you told me that he's misrepresented sometimes in the media. That you say people think he's completely against medication, but do you want to clear that up for us?
Yeah, certainly we're speaking with Frank regularly on this matter. Frank acknowledges that taking medication is important for his well-being. But Frank's always argued that previously he might have been assessed on risk, big, strong, powerful guy. But actually, when you meet Frank, he's actually quite a withdrawn, anxious guy. The misconceptions what the heavyweight champion, the world, former heavyweight champion of the world is to reality is quite ironic. But Frank identifies if he's overly medicated, he can't do the things that he believes are as important for his mental health as well as medication. That is, if he's feeling tired and drained and lethargic because of over being medicated, he can't exercise. His motivation to go out for a walk, see friends, see family, eat good foods is heavily affected. So Frank acknowledges that his medication is very, very important. He just believes it's as important to be balanced with his regular daily structure. Frank's 61 years of age now, still trains in his home gym every day. That to him is as important as the medication.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up, James. And reading certain sections of the book, Let Me Be Frank, I was really impressed by his approach. It was that I want to bring in lifestyle factors to really help me get through this, and not ruling out the medication where it was required, as you said, but bringing in those lifestyle factors. And I think it's so important for people to think in terms of their well-being. There are so many things we can do, and I think society has become overly medicalized. That's my view. It's a pill for every ill. Yes, medication can help in a lot of cases, but it's not the only the only answer. What are your thoughts on the medical? How do you think society is over medicalised? Do you think it's just right, or do you think it's under medicalised? What's your view?
I think we've crossed a balance over, and that's the difficult area for me. I think it's too easy to give an individual a label and not explain to the individual what that potential label may mean. Because as soon as we give somebody a label, it becomes a barrier, and it becomes a, I can't do this because of this. Whereas actually you can, you just need support to understand and find the plans B, C, D, E, and E. And it's really funny with mental health that I always say, if 10 people break their legs, it will all affect them differently. One will be the tibia, the fibula, some will be both. You know, some people will recover in 10 weeks, some people will recover in 6 months. But we don't hold that view of mental health. It's kind of, you have this and it's going to affect you like this. Medication is important for the right need. But the problem is sometimes is that when we give a label, it almost shuts people down. So then the motivation to go for a walk, participate in exercise, see family and friends, understand the importance of good food, which is really important for all of our mental health, let alone being given a diagnosis. That to me is just as important as that medical view. And I think the bit we need to get back to educating in our society is that when I used to do these talks 10 years ago, it made me laugh. It used to say, there used to be a PowerPoint presentation somewhere from somebody saying, 1 in 4 of you will experience mental health. And everybody kind of looks around the room, kind of trying to guess which person that's going to be. Everybody experiences mental health, positive, negative, and unfortunately some people experience mental ill health. But actually, if we start to get the understanding that we all experience mental health, and there are numerous holistic things that we all can do to improve our mental health, then we're going to be in a far better place in society.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think that's it. It's almost as if there's a whole menu of things that we can try, but almost most of the other things are being scrubbed out on the menu. You know, the exercise, the nutrition, the good sleep, fasting, all of those things have been scrubbed out. But the things that are still in giant bold letters are things like medication, you know, the medical interventions that have the financial backing behind them. So what would you say then to, because I think in terms of labels, I would agree with, I think labels do put people in a box. And you just said that 2 people or 10 people who break their leg could experience it a different way, which is completely obvious, isn't it? 10 people who get the label of bipolar, let's say, could experience it in a completely different way. I have friends who've experienced this, and it almost makes people think the label is a uniform, solid thing that exists, an entity in itself, when they're more descriptive. It's a way of, I guess, mental health professionals being able to have a language they can communicate in. But it doesn't necessarily mean everyone with that label is exactly the same, does it? So I guess they're all going to need to take a different approach. What do you think to do about social media then? So people who are going on social media, they're self-diagnosing. We talked about TikTok earlier, didn't we, before we came on air? What's your experience of that? What have you seen around that?
Listen, we're a mental health charity. So firstly, using social media is a really positive tool for us because it allows us to get our support, our message out there, and the awareness of what we do out there. So from that element, it's really positive. I also joke that my mother has a little field where she keeps numerous animals, and she's got this bird, which is a rhea, which is like a smaller version of an ostrich. This bird escaped just before Christmas, and it went wildfire on social media. She was able to get it. Brilliant. She then got the national press in because where she lived, there was these stories of an ostrich was running roosts around Northamptonshire. So I always use that, social media can be a positive, but social media has become really, really unbalanced, particularly for young people coming through. And what concerns me is that the balance of life is completely going, too much screen time, too much influences, and it gives that constant view, particularly for young people, that we need to compare ourselves. So we don't learn how to be positive and content within ourselves. We're always learning that we need to be better. We're not as good as that situation, which actually isn't true. Social media for me is a show reel. It's not real. It's false. You can see a trailer of a film and it looked the most amazing film in the world. And then you get 20 minutes into the film and you go, this is really rubbish. And quite often social media can be a little bit like that, between the portrayal of someone's life to the reality of someone's life. But we get a lot of false information put out there by a lot of people that put it out there to do clickbaits ultimately.
Yeah.
And when we're dealing with a subject matter of mental health, that's really dangerous. I think for me, what I see a lot with young people is the misunderstanding now between experiencing something like an anxious moment and that being a diagnosis that you're mentally ill. Because when I talk about anxiety, I have a lived-in experience of anxiety. I suffered from enduring anxiety from teenage years. But when I experienced it, I was never going to talk to anybody because I cannot portray this as a male in a male-dominated environment where I was growing up in to say, I'm struggling with my mental health. It was a no-no. Whereas now we can. But if someone had guided me that anxious feelings are okay compared to an anxiety disorder that I was going through, that would have been far more positive. But when I talk to young people now, if you feel anxious, it actually could be a positive. And I always use the example of a young person of going for the first job interview. You will feel anxious, but being anxious will make you research the job role, check the times of the interview, iron your suit, prepare your questions. And then after the interview, your anxiety relaxes. If we didn't have that anxious feeling of young people who start to associate that that's a negative feeling, then if we didn't have that feeling, we wouldn't iron our suit, we wouldn't know what interview we were turning up for, we wouldn't prepare for the interview. So we try and reiterate it as a positive tool for young people. But the problem with the social media element is that we're kind of reinforcing a little bit that all these feelings clinically mean that you are mentally unwell. And that's the concern that I hold.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I'm not personally on TikTok, but I do hear from the young people in our boxing gym about these sort of things and these messages with influencers talking about their mental health journey. And maybe they're paid by pharmaceutical companies or they're people who just want to create videos, but they're talking about it as if they become an expert in something. And I think that can be, I get a lot of the idea that some people are encouraging people to identify with labels, and maybe we're all struggling for an identity in society, and it's how can I stand out? Well, if I have got this label that everyone else hasn't got, then I can stand out. And or I've got this label, and suddenly it can be a race to accumulate as many labels as possible, which might feel good to the person at the time because it's giving them a sense of identity, but actually they're putting themselves in a box that might lead them in quite a negative direction. So what about then, would you say when the young people, because I noticed that the foundation, you work with people 13 upwards, what do you say to them when your message about social media, what advice do you give them when they come into your gym?
It's that balanced approach. We actually now work from the age of 10, but we've changed it because over the last 2 years since the fallout of COVID, the referrals to young people's mental health has become a lot more significant. So I would say about 18 months ago, the referrals into us were probably 80% adults and 20% young people. Now it's 50-50. So we've changed our programs to factor in work with young people more. The other element that we factor in more as well is school exclusions at the moment. So we start tomorrow, we put a provision in on a Wednesday for any young person that cannot access school because they're being homeschooled or the mental health is a barrier at school or they've been excluded, can come here and we do some non-contact boxing exercise and workshops for them here. Because actually being in school is really important for your mental health in terms of your structure, your routine, your discipline, but being around your friends, laughing, joking, all of that. These young people are being taken away from these environments. We also have a big concern about the safety in our streets. You know, we're in Northamptonshire, which is bang in the centre of the UK. And we have a huge problem with county lines gang problems at the moment. And what we are not educating the families enough is that school exclusions are handing more young people into gangs.
Yeah,
which has a horrendous effect then for young people's mental health. So young people's mental health is only increasing. To come back to your question on where we guide them on social media, it's checking the validity of the person you are watching and being influenced by. Don't judge them because they've got 125,000 followers. Judge them because of what their background is, what their qualifications are, what their experiences are. That's what we try and educate young people on. And actually, a young person last week shared that last week they'd spent 25 hours of their week on TikTok. And I said, you've lost a day of your life. If I gave you a day what could you achieve in a day? Whereas all you've done in 25 hours is watch other people's lives. So your own life has stopped to watch other people's. What have you learned? What has been so significant within those 25 hours that you can say definitively changed your life? And they can't really answer that. But what's interesting is when we work with young people now, if we're doing an exercise or groups or games, a lot of young people are, what's next? Or the attention to what we're doing is a lot shorter, because the TikTok world now is everything's learned beginning, middle, and end in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So actually, let's focus for 10 minutes. It's getting a lot harder and a lot more challenging because, now my partner's got a 15-year-old daughter, and it only dawned on me the week when we were in the car, we never listened to a full song because it's like 30 seconds a minute, next song, because that is now, music is now released that way via TikTok as well. So everything's a lot more rushed for these young people rather than that ability to kind of sit, relax, enjoy the moment a little bit more.
So I guess it's almost social media is sort of conditioning young minds to be very bite-sized, expect everything to be short, everything to be immediate as well. Because I guess if you see a video of somebody learning a skill or something online on TikTok, would it be you see the whole progress in 30 seconds, where real life clearly doesn't work that way. And this brings me back to boxing, because I do see that as a boxing coach as well, that the young people do struggle to focus, but not just the young people. I find that with a lot of adults as well.
Yeah.
What would you say then are the key life skills? Because a lot of people might be listening and think, well, boxing, I don't want to go and get punched in the face and all that stuff. What would you say the key skills, life skills that people take away, whether young or old, that the key, if you give me a top 3 key life skills that you would say that anyone who comes through your programs takes away?
Yeah, we run non-contact boxing here. So non-contact boxing is people who come here don't spar. They're doing pad holding and bag work and exercise work. But for the young people in particular, discipline, routine, respect. We have a rule with our young people: the stresses are left at the door, come and train, then we can pick them up if you need to talk to somebody. For the adults that access our program, they would never ever dream, some of them are picking up a boxing glove, but the first thing it does, it helps release some stress. So we start our day with a cuppa, and then the first thing they're doing is going into the gym, and we say, look, you may have these problems and these worries going on. We can sit with you and talk you through. But what we want you to do first is go and channel that energy, whether it be exercise, punching the bag, doing any form of exercise, get the endorphins up. I always joke with young people, when I left school, we would run to the park to get goalposts to play football because we didn't want to use jumpers, right? Now it's running home for FIFA. So we don't get the endorphins up enough, which is one of the best drugs you can have for your well-being. So actually, people coming in here knowing that once a week, that twice a week, I come in and I channel my energy and I focus on something positive, in something that I never ever thought I'd be able to achieve. We've had individuals come in here that have been in wheelchairs, but we can still adapt the program that they can still hit the pads and they get such a good sense of well-being from it. Bringing the endorphins up naturally, because in today's world, I'll talk nutrition a little bit, we get in sugar rushes, caffeine hits, drug rushes from getting likes on phones. We're getting short 2-second rushes rather than that. Got the endorphins up. That was a brilliant hour's worth of training. I feel good. My mind is cleared. I'm ready to go and start my day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it, isn't it? That outlet. I think so. Boxing, it doesn't have to be, like you said, your programs don't involve the contact. They don't involve the sparring. Sparring, for anyone who doesn't know, is where you get in the ring with someone. You actually are boxing with each other, okay? And there is full contact at various degrees of intensity. So that letting it out then, I guess, think about how many people in society come home from a tough day at work, James, and it's, I'm just going to open a bottle of wine just to decompress. So what you're saying is the putting on the gloves, hitting the pads, that is the form of decompression that you give people.
Yeah, and that sense of achievement in a positive way, that sense of feeling good. Also, being around other individuals is a really powerful tool. And I stem this bit with some work I did 20 years ago. I was a young male 20 years ago. I was in my early 20s doing community mental health work and some exercise and stuff. And I kind of almost got put onto my caseload the young schizophrenic gentleman in each village. So I was going out to a town and a village working with these young men that were just completely isolated. So I came up with an idea of making a gardening group where other clients that we were supporting who had big gardens, couldn't keep on top of the gardens, I would come with 4 or 5 young gentlemen and they would volunteer doing the garden. And the powerful tool of that was me just stepping back and hearing one young gentleman who might have heard voices say to another young gentleman, do you hear voices? Do you get low moods? What's that like for you? Being able to relate and share those experiences whilst doing something positive, which had an end result that they could see, and then see the gratuity of the person who they'd done the gardening for. That was such a simple tool, but to me has stood by me to today's world. So the individuals that access our foundation might feel really isolated in the community. We have improved our understanding of mental health a lot in society, but there still is a lot of stigmas and stereotypes around there, particularly with men still. So, some men to come into our building and actually see other men their age that might have professional careers. We've had teachers, nurses, we've had professionals come on our programs here and thinking, okay, well, I can share my journey with someone else and not be judged for it. I can hold the pads with someone else and enjoy that moment and develop some friendship circles in a safe environment. That's really important.
Yeah, I like the idea of the connection side of things, because maybe for some people as well, we talked about men earlier and this idea about it being hard maybe to talk about things, harder to talk about things. But when you're engaged in exercise with someone, whether you're working in pairs or working in a group, someone's holding pads or someone's hitting the bag or whatever it is, the bits that come up, there's no pressure to talk, but you might talk when you feel the need to. You're hitting the pads, and oh yeah, so what have you been up to lately? Carry on hitting the pads. Oh yeah. Who's your football team? Yeah. And so without even realizing, without that forced pressure to talk, people are actually communicating and connecting with each other. Because I notice in our gym, we've got a great community. We have certain rules about the way people speak to each other. There's no swearing allowed in the gym. People aren't allowed to smoke anywhere around the gym premises. We don't criticize. No one's allowed to comment on anyone else's weight or anything like that, because we know these can be issues that affect each other. And we have a bit of a rule. If you're going to say anything, say something positive. We want you to big each other up rather than trying to shoot each other down, because we get enough of that in society. So what would you say, James, about this idea of doing something good and getting recognition for that? What sort of effect does that have on the people on your programs? They're doing something good and getting recognition for their growth.
Yeah, just prior to that, just one thought popped to my mind, which I think is significant to our last point as well. In COVID times, there was a part of Northampton which is very much kind of industrial. Part of Northampton is known for its shoe industry, and there was a part of Northampton where we in the NHS were seeing a rise in suicidal tendencies from men from the age of 35 to 55, and no one could work out why. And it was at a time when we were having lockdowns and restrictions. And it was really quite straightforward to work out that these were men's men who didn't feel they needed to talk about their issues. But what we'd done was Northampton Saints, you couldn't go and watch them play. You couldn't go and watch Northampton Town play. The pubs were shut. The cafes were shut. Now, these are all places where men were going, talking about their problems without realising they were talking about their problems. And it was interesting that as soon as we took away the resources like the rugby club, the pub, the snooker halls, the rise in mental health in men rose because they didn't realise that they weren't releasing those inner problems.
So that social release then, social release valve. And because I think maybe we think, it'd be interesting to hear your views on this, James. This thing about that everything can go online. Obviously, you and I are speaking virtually now, and it's a great thing. But I think there was almost a race for life to go online and stay online. And I don't think that's a good thing for us socially. What's that idea around mirror neurons, when we can read each other, even non-verbally, when we're in a room with each other? You can't do that same thing. You can't read people in the same way online as you can when you're in a room together. No. So what would you say to that? How the effect, what do you think of how do you think it's affecting young people and people in general? This race to move everything digital.
It's speed, isn't it? And it's speed to get a feeling of like, isn't it? I often quote the comedian Russell Howard. Made this in one of his stand-up bits, which I think is such a funny but true element. He said that he can go on Instagram and see a lady in a bikini, and he can like it, love heart it, do an aubergine emoji. But in real life, if he walked up on a beach and saw a woman in a bikini and just stood over and went, I like that, and brought an aubergine out of a bag, he'd probably get arrested. That is the difference between social media reality and like some real life, isn't it? And I always use that as a humorous way to start the talking point. But the problem is it's constant comparison. I remember working about 15 years ago with a lady who was a fitness model. We did quite a lot of training together. And she got to about 6% body fat and did a weekend's photo shoot. And in that weekend's photo shoot, she must have took about 380 photos in different outfits. Those photos got released over the whole year. So she was only 6% body fat for that weekend. The rest of the year, she led a balanced lifestyle. The following weekend, she was having a pizza. The following weekend after that, she was having drinks with a friend. And actually, she's very good on social media now because she teaches that positive reinforcement. But because if you looked at the agency works at the time, they were just releasing those photos every weekend. So the perception was, you need to look like this all year round. Now, for young people, that's incredibly damaging.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the fitness element for young people and what they see online in particular, we've stopped considering the use of the foods we eat and the exercise we complete being about our physical health and our mental health well-being. And it's too much judged on how we aesthetically look.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest concern we have now, that there's a race that every young person, the blokes, need to look like the guys in Love Island. And that then for young people, there's a problem with young men now, the rise in steroid misuse in young men, because they don't want to spend the 5 to 10 years consistent training to get to that end goal. They want to get it in 10 weeks because they've got a holiday in Ibiza coming up.
Yes. I think I can see, because actually, and they have, so you've raised some really interesting things there. So yeah, this idea, I think, first of all, about the man with the aubergine, it's the online world is probably teach people the rules you of interaction online don't apply to the real world. So I guess the more time we spend interacting online, we're not developing skills that we actually apply in the real world, because you don't go up to a woman with an aubergine on the beach. I hope most of us wouldn't anyway, unless it's your wife and she asked you to get an aubergine from the shop. So I guess it's teaching us to conduct ourselves in a way that doesn't apply to the real world, which can create a misfit already. But I like what you're saying about this body thing, because I don't know if you ever saw years ago Harder, Faster, Stronger, the documentary. I think it was, do you remember the one about bodybuilding? It's all about how...
Yes, yeah.
Do you remember that one? And then he speaks to the photographer and the photographer says, look, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but these before and after photos are taken on the same day. And he talks about how he photoshops them and changes them. So obviously, people are looking at those images and seeing this curated image that not only it's like you said about the model with the 6% body fat on that specific day, they're dehydrated, they're at low body fat, they use perfect lighting, there's Photoshop, all of that has gone into these images, and people are therefore trying to compare themselves to those things, which is an unattainable goal. And I think one really positive example that comes from two that come from the boxing world, maybe not great for Anthony Joshua, but Anthony Joshua was built like a god. And he lost to someone who, let's say Andy Ruiz, wasn't built like a god. He was carried a lot of extra body fat. And I think in a way that sent a message, because it was, you don't have to look amazing to be world champion and perform. Like Tyson Fury, he's not got a six-pack or any of that stuff, but he's one of the greatest boxers of all time. He's the greatest heavyweight on the planet right now. He does not have shredded abs or all of that stuff. It's an example. You can perform incredibly regardless of how you look. And I'm not saying being overweight is healthy. I'm not saying that for a second, but you can perform without having a perfect body. What would you say to that, James?
Yeah, and 100%. And also, why are we exercising? What we should have it as our own individual toolkits. Exercise should be about you're working towards achieving a goal. So if you're deadlifting, you want to build up your deadlifting strength. If you're learning to box, eventually you might go into sparring, or you might feel confident doing some pad combinations. If you're playing football, you want to maintain your position in the team. It should be about working towards your goals, but your physical health and your mental health and your well-being, that's really important. The problem now for a lot of young people has been based on, you need to aesthetically look this to get likes and acceptance, and this is what society's telling you, you have to look like this. Whereas actually, you can have the greatest hours exercise in the world. If you don't understand what you're putting in your body for the 23 hours around it, that's equally as damaging. And that's the biggest concern. We do a nutrition workshop here, which is, I use a pint glass and a bag of sugar, particularly with young people and adults experiencing high levels of anxiety. And all we do is we get individuals as a group to guess how many teaspoons of sugars are in products. So when we show them the particular bag of sweets that has 24 teaspoons of sugar in, when they see that in a pint glass, and then I say, how many of you will have that before you go to bed? And then how many of you will struggle to sleep? And then how many of you will wake up feeling more agitated and anxious the next day because you've not slept? And actually, how many of you don't understand how to eat foods correctly? You starve yourselves through the day to then overindulge in the evenings, all of these elements. If you haven't got those factors right, the hours exercise, you won't achieve your goals.
Yeah, it's that saying, can't out-train a bad diet. Can't out-train a bad diet. And it's so true, isn't it? Well, before we touch on some nutrition then, I think, this idea that indirectly, I guess the physique in many cases will come as a byproduct of your quest for health. If you want to be as healthy as possible, you will naturally do the things that will give you that physique over time. But I think if I get gauging what you're saying correctly, James, you're saying people are going wrong because their quest is the body rather than the body being the byproduct.
Yeah, and also the focus that exercise is really good for our well-being and our mental health. If you remember in lockdowns when Boris let us out once a day for a walk, people were coming to me going, James, I did this amazing thing. I go for a walk around the country park. It's brilliant. I'm like, that was around before COVID. And that should be really positive. But and the other essence I give that, I live near an industrial unit and I walk my dog before I go to work. It clears my head. Since the launch of scooters, which were there to reduce the amount of cars on the road, I don't see anybody walking to work anymore. So that little moment before you go to work of, putting a headset in, listening to your favourite song, listening to a podcast, clearing the mind before you go to work, it's gone. That's negative for your mental health. We're in such a rush society now, and we think exercise is only about going to the gym, but actually exercise is walking to school, walking to work. People ask me, what's the hardest sport I've ever done? As a child, watching my mum carrying the shopping home from the supermarket. She was like world's strongest woman with 10 bags. I had to keep up with her. But we were active everywhere. I used to know the friends of mine that were in the park, because when I got to the park, I'd recognise the bikes.
Yeah.
And we've lost that activity side in life. We're far more sedentary. If I want bread and milk tonight, I can get a robot to bring it to my house.
It's impressively sad, isn't it? The fact that the technology is great, but the fact that we even need, I'm near the co-op near me, they've got the little robot thingies outside, and I just think, it'll take me 6 minutes to walk there. Do I really need to order something to come to me? So I think it's interesting you say, because when you're talking about the lockdown, so people were talking about these walks that, like you said, the walks were there before, they just weren't accessing them. Maybe there's some psychological lesson there. When people have the ability to do something removed, it increases the desire to do that particular thing. So maybe our government could, in a non-malevolent way, in a benevolent way, maybe take a bit of that psychology on board in some lesson or other. So let's move on to the nutrition side now. What do you teach when people come through your programs? What are the key things you teach them around nutrition?
Well, firstly, because of sales, fad gimmicks, diet plans, all of these sales things which are about money, we have a lot of adults come to us that have been what I call institutionalized by a diet approach. And I don't like the terminology diets. I believe in balance. So I always joke, as a child, I only went to a McDonald's for a birthday party. There was a train in our local McDonald's. The kids would sit on. Some really scary dude dressed as Ronald McDonald, probably a DBS check in today's bubbles, would come out. But we didn't go back to a McDonald's until it was a birthday party or a really rare occurrence for a family. I joke. I think my neighbour in lockdown one, I thought she was having an affair with the Uber Eats guy from McDonald's because he was having a day. We've lost the balance. There are no bad foods, and the concerning thing for me is that people have done these diets and things. They're identifying foods as bad and as sins, and they're developing a healthy relationship with the understanding of food. So firstly, it's about teaching individuals balance, and then teaching individuals some of the most simplistic things about foods that actually, the far more processed foods you have, the far more sugary and caffeine foods we have, means you're only getting short levels of energy. So then what happens is your blood sugar spike, then your mood crashes. Teaching parents that actually your child shouldn't have a can of Monster Energy going to school. They should have breakfast. And the effects that can have on people's physical health and mental health as well. But ultimately, the starting point for me is always about balance. It's okay. If it's my son's birthday next week and he wants to go out for a pizza, we will go out for a pizza. If I take him out for fast food and order him food 5 times a week, that's not okay. We will have physical health problems. And inevitably, the more physical health problems you have, you're more likely to experience poorer mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the connection between metabolic health, which, blood pressure, blood sugar, blood fats, cholesterol, BMI, all that, and mental health is, it's bi-directional, isn't it? That your physical health affects your metabolic health affects your mental health affects your metabolic health. So what about, I like the idea that you're teaching simple principles, because when I studied my personal training qualification years ago, we did a lot of nutrition as part of that. And I do have to admit, I find the nutritional science gets overly complicated. If you want people to follow simple healthy eating principles, talking them to about all these, Latin sounding vitamins and minerals, you've got to get this from this and this from this. It creates overwhelm, which is good if you want to sell a product to someone that simplifies it, or, in a pill, a multivitamin. But if you want people to actually adapt their lifestyle, it's got to be simplified. It's got to be simplified. So I like the fact that you're talking about balance, because nutrition can be simple. Yeah. One of the key things is, like you've said, if something's processed, it's going to break down in your body far more quickly, usually with sugars and insulin spikes, all those things, which we know over time, constantly doing that's going to negatively impact our health. What do you say about things like hydration or alcohol, any of those areas?
Yeah, and again, balance again. We do have individuals come on our program that have had issues around substance misuse and alcohol misuse, and we do work with another great charity, Bridge, who support those individuals. I guess it's everything, around alcohol, around sugary snacks. Caffeine is another one. I always joke when the American TV show Friends come on the TV 20 years ago, us British people watched that and went, these Americans meet in a coffee house. That is really weird. That will never, ever happen in the UK. And like where I live, I've got 3 Starbucks, 3 Costas, a 24-hour Tesco's, another one, all scattered around me. So what's happening is we are going into the whole, I need energy. I must need a coffee because I'm tired. Caffeine fix to relax down. So then you link it into physical performance, mental health, anxiety spikes, low moods to teach people. But things around alcohol, again, it's about balance. The problem is now is that we have become a unbalanced society with it all. And I think it's too easy now that we've learned alcohol, food, things as a reward system.
Yeah.
Have a good day, have a drink, have a biscuit. Have a bad day, have a drink, have a biscuit. We've lost this moderation of balance again.
Yeah, I think I'm picking up this theme around balance, and I think I like what you're saying here, because there are, you look at things like Slimming World. I think SINS comes from Slimming World as opposed to Weight Watchers, and I guess if you're repeatedly reinforcing the idea that a food is a sin, then that's going to create a problem. That's going to create an imbalanced relationship with foods, because I think from what you're saying, no food is a sin if it's in balance. If you're having Mars bars every day, that's in balance. But if you're having it every now and then as a treat, then it's balanced. It's not technically a sin, is it?
And you also have the institutionalized behavior around being obsessive on weight. So you will know in boxing, you know, a boxer can make weight for a fight on a Saturday. Let's say as a cruiserweight boxer, on a Friday afternoon, he could be 14 stone 4. But we know the next night in the ring, he could be up to 15 stone quite easily, couldn't he?
Absolutely.
So when we're saying to the, you know, the individuals, actually, if you're getting obsessed on the scales, if you are stepping on the scales in your bathroom and it says you haven't lost any weight, and then you move it to the other end of the bathroom and step on because that shows it there you've lost a pound.
Yes.
It's poor choice of behaviour. Actually, your weight is it's a loose way to gauge things. And if you're a boxer, a jockey, or got a surgery coming up, you know, your weight is quite relevant. But being obsessive on it and that being the definitive element of your success is flawed. We try and relax it down to how are your clothes feeling? And most importantly, what are your measurements? Because that shows that your progress is working the right way. Because ultimately, what happens on these fad diets is individuals starve themselves, then the scales won't show the true reflection of their work, and it's all failed. And then we go back to learned behaviors. So people just yo-yo, or they identify that I've got a holiday coming up, so I need to lose a stone for the holiday, or I've got a wedding coming up, I need to lose a stone for that, rather than it being focused on that balanced approach. I keep using that word balanced. That balanced approach about if your goal is to become healthy, learn a sport and exercise an activity that has goals related to it, you're more than likely going to achieve that objective you want about your physical appearance. I'm pretty sure it was one of my apprentices pointed out to me that one of the fad diet places, I think an avocado is something like 12 or 15 sins. I think avocado is an amazing food. I think a can of Strongbow is 8.
It's got apples in it, I guess.
So, you know, I don't really advocate here, guys, in the morning before you exercise, don't have that avocado and egg for breakfast. Have a can of Strongbow. That's not what we promote.
It'll give you the energy, I guess, temporarily. Well, I think, because it's interesting, this, isn't it? The way we think about a lot of these foods, it is out of kilter. Because, for something to be, let's say you took coconut oil or you took avocados and they are more of a sin than a bowl of pasta or a can of Strongbow, is very backward. So I guess this brings back to think about societally then. We've got, if someone who's not that educated around nutrition is getting these messages and they think they're good messages because it says, well, avocado is really high in fat and I've got fat around my middle, so I need to lower the fat. But we know those things aren't the case. You know, all those good monounsaturated fats and things like avocados are very beneficial to physical and mental well-being. So I guess people are struggling with that. So how do you help people who come into your programs, these preconceived ideas that, no, I need to focus on weight, I need to get my calories down, I need to stop eating fat because I know that is the way to do it? What would you say to that sort of person?
We focus again on that. What are your goals? What's your structure? And what's your current diary like? So most people don't actually understand how we should eat food. So the first thing I do is ask people to write down, okay, so tell me how you eat food in a day. And more often than not, the structure is that from 7 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening. And then 5 o'clock in the evening until 10 o'clock in the evening, most people have less calories between 7 and 5 and have more calories between 5 and 10 in the evening. So you break it down into its simplest terms. When do you feel you need to energize your body the most? You need to energize your body in the day more. In the same way that, you know, when a baby is born, you wouldn't just give the baby a bottle of milk at the start of the day, allow the baby to go through the day without eating, and then in the evening come with a 6-pint pitcher of milk for that baby to consume. So we try and link into what your body needs for energy, what your brain needs to be stimulated by food as well, because your brain is fed by the foods we eat as well. And if you are sugar spiking and caffeine spiking your body rather than eating foods, how that can relate into your anxious feelings and your low mood as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from someone who, you know, you mentioned earlier that you had a bit of an anxious background. I'm exactly the same. And I know for me, if I have if I have 3 cups of coffee in a day, I'd be bouncing off the walls and my mind is completely different. I think we're so, for some reason, society unwilling to accept this connection between what you eat and what happens in your mind. And, you know, this ketogenic diet, which is the one that's based mostly on fats, about 70% fats or so, used to be originally over 100 years ago, it was created to stop seizures in young children. So our diet has a massive impact. If you eat, You drink alcohol, you know you're going to feel great suddenly. If you crash on sugar, you're going to feel awful when we get hungry. So we need to be open to this idea that what we eat affects our mind. It's a massive thing. What would you say to people who think that, because we know that your diet, in terms of changing body composition, the diet is more important than the exercise. They support each other, but the diet's more important. How do you manage the people who come in then that they won't change their diet, but they want to train like mad?
Firstly, understanding what's the anxious feeling around needing to train like mad. Because actually, if you want to train to that intensity, it's then educating someone about it's about your body's recovery and how you refuel it to be able to train. So we try and link it into performance. So if you come in and train for 3 hours intensely and you don't refuel correctly around that, you are more likely to get injured. You're not going to be able to produce at the levels you want to. You're not going to be able to improve your performance because the body doesn't have the energy around it. I quite often use the example that we sometimes take more notice of the food we feed our pets than we do ourselves, because ultimately we know that giving the dog too many treats will cause a bit of weight gain and hip problems and joint problems. Nobody wants an expensive vet's bill. Whereas we don't use the same thinking for our own body and performance.
Maybe it's because the NHS is free. That's probably part. There's no consequence, is there? If you take your dog into poor health or your cat to poor health through the dietary things, then expensive vet bills. But for humans, there isn't actually in our society a consequence, is there? The NHS is always there to pick up the slack. Now, as you were speaking a moment ago, James, the word performance, and you really grabbed me because when I think performance, if we aim to fuel our body to perform, what can I do? And this is the beauty of sport for me. When I want to perform at sport, I mean, I boxed for a number of years. I played rugby and played football over the years. Boxing is my sport though, and I know if I want to be, when I get in the ring, I want to be at tip-top condition. I've got to do everything, the eating, the sleeping, the diet, all of those things for performance, and the physique was just a byproduct of that. Yeah. So let's explore that then, James. What do you do in your program that sort of helps people to focus on performance and using that as a goal as opposed to the aesthetics?
When a lot of individuals come to us, it's because they are facing challenging times in life. They need mental health support, they need structure, they need routine. Their current platform of how they're living their life is not working. So our ideology is to give the tools to help. Now, we can only give the tools. We cannot change somebody's life. And we make that clear straight away that actually, if you want to meet the person that changes your life, you have to look in the mirror. That's the hard bit. We have to become accountable to ourselves first. And then it's about being supported and understanding the tools and the purpose of the tools. So for a lot of our individuals that might be struggling with high levels of anxiety, more depressive moods, generally struggling to function in day-to-day life, we use the element of performance around well-being. That's the starting point. And then once you achieve that starting point, how do we set goals? Because a lot of our goals in life are the end goal. I want a holiday. I want a bigger car. I want a faster car. I want to marry. These things that are a long way away, where actually we break it down to your short-term goals are your well-being. They're your daily structures and routines. Your medium-term goals are what are helping you develop to achieve those end-term, longer-term goals. But a goal is only a goal if you start working towards it. If you don't start working towards it, it's a dream, isn't it? So the element of performance is based around, firstly, where are you currently now? What tools do we need to put in place to allow you to develop further?
Yeah, that makes complete sense, and that carries over. I guess achieving this in this sports perspective carries over into life. All those skills, self-reliance, the determination, the discipline, the motivation will then carry over into other areas of life. And we have in our gym, we have a number of people who openly admit they come in to our gym purely because of their mental health issues. They don't want to box in all cases. They just want to do the sport because they know it really does help. So some of the things I've seen with people, it's the connection with others. It's the doing something they didn't realize they could do. It's the stepping outside the comfort zone. It's the getting into that flow state, which, chick sent me high concept of where the thing is just difficult enough and it's just interesting enough and you hit that sweet spot where we get into what he called flow, other people would call the zone. So there's so many benefits that people get from turning up to the gym without even having the contact element. What other bits would you add to that, James, that people take away when they're boxing?
We have a number of classes. So our foundation also has an amateur boxing club, and we do some other non-contact boxing class for professional individuals, here who don't want to do workshops, just want to come into an environment. I would say it's that community element. We're tribal as people. We like being around people, right? And we get a sense of good feeling and satisfaction around it. And sometimes just knowing that you walk in the door after the hardest day possible, but within 2 minutes, you're taking the mickey out your mate's new pink boxing boots. or actually, going in, doing the warm-up, hearing someone else about their day, sharing your views, taking the mickey out of your friend whose football team has lost. It makes you feel better about being around people. And it's such an undervalued resource. And I think, in terms of what I do in community, we've lost youth clubs. We've lost boxing clubs, from our communities because they haven't been as well supported through, because the goal of viewed as somebody who's not in boxing is, well, are they filling the class and bringing through champions? Whereas actually, for me, the champions are the kids whose lives we're saving by giving them a safe place and, making them not go into gangs. And actually that individual who's really struggling with their mental health, coming here 3 times a week and having a consistent, happier life makes them a champion.
Yeah, absolutely. The social element is so important. I think I know of someone who my girlfriend was speaking to, and she said that mentioned what I do, that in my voluntary, I'm a boxing coach, and he was completely turned away. He was really disappointed that she was with someone who's involved in boxing. And I think there is that pervasive attitude in society. You're teaching people how to be thugs, or you're taking kids who are aggressive and you're giving them the skills to be even more violent. And I think it couldn't be further from the truth, because you have to have the discipline to stick with it. If you're an undisciplined person, you won't stick with the sport. What do you think it is about boxing that's different to other sports? What would you say, James?
Well, I think that you've got the individual element to it as well. So, you can, you've played football, I played a bit of football. I could step on a football pitch and be right back and have an absolutely horrendously bad game, which I quite often did. But the team still win. And whilst that's good for team camaraderie and something, when you go into a boxing gym on your own, it's about yourself. It's about your self-reflection, your thoughts, your feelings. It allows you to channel that energy in a positive way than a negative way. So that young person who has broke mum's door 4 times by punching it in a rage, just by knowing that they can go to the gym on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, is enough to reassure the brain to go, right, okay, channel that energy. I'm going to release that energy in the right, appropriate, correct way, on a punch bag or the pads, or just by talking it through with a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And the warm-ups, the circuit train, all that stuff, that physical exertion lets it out, doesn't it? And if we go back to the thing about social media, there's no expression. A lot of these things are quite passive. When you're sat going on Twitter or scrolling through TikTok or something like that, it's passive. We're just sitting there passively. When you're in the gym, hitting pads, hitting the bag, doing your circuits, doing your warm-ups, it's not passive. It's all active. You've got to be fully engaged, mind and body fully engaged. And I think it brings me to this idea of expression. I had a couple of artists on here on my podcast recently. We talk about the benefits of creative expression. And I think a lot of people undervalue the amount of creative expression that goes into boxing, because you look at the boxing world, you could have Prince Nazim, you could have Frank Bruno, you could have Mike Tyson. They all express their talents differently in a way that's unique to them. And I think for a lot of kids who are maybe starved of creative expression, boxing, sports can really give them that. Have you seen much of that in the people that you work with, James? This expressing themselves.
Again, in terms of young people, you might have a young person who academically struggles, but actually excels in the gym.
Yeah.
And that to them is so, so, so important, because that's where they get that sense of achievement, sense of well done. We all like to be patted on the back. We all like to be appreciated. We all like to be told, well done. If you're just in an environment where it's a negative all the time, your mental health will become more negative. Whereas if you know you can release it in something that you excel at and you are really good at and really positive, it's only positive for your mental health as well.
Definitely. I can think of occasions in the gym where I've complimented a young boxer on something they've done, and the look of surprise on their face told me that they're not used to that. They're not used to being that positive reinforcement that you've done something well. They seem like they're used to being told they've done something badly. It's constant reprimands rather than positives.
Yeah.
What I think also this staircasing element, I was thinking of it as a staircase. You start in the gym day one, you don't know, you can't put your feet properly, you can't walk like a boxer because you don't walk and move in a standard way in boxing. You have to unlearn certain movements. So I think this idea that you're never the finished article in boxing. There's always something to get better at. And I think that carrot, I guess, you're always chasing that getting better at some point. I think that has a positive impact. What would you say to that, James?
Yeah, 100%. And we've adjusted some of our programs here for young people where, you know, the goal of going to an amateur boxing club is to fight, isn't it? To have a boxing match. Whereas obviously we're looking more around workshops and using boxing tools. So we have created like a martial arts grading system, whereas at the end of 8 weeks, the young guys will show that they can throw their combinations correctly, do some workshops. They'll receive a coloured T-shirt rather than a belt. And then they can work towards another T-shirt and another T-shirt. And at the end of that, we're going to aim them to become a junior leader, whereas they've done 5 T-shirts, worked their way through. When they become a junior leader, they can help coach the classes for young people as well. So actually, that misconception that you have to go to a boxing gym to have a fight is not true. You can come to the foundation and work towards a productive way with goals being set there that acknowledge your achievements as well.
I think that sounds brilliant because that way we're bringing in, you've got the physical element, you've got the psychological element, you've got the social element as well. So, I mean, this is hopefully for everyone who's listening, this is why boxing, the things that James is talking about here, this is why boxing is such an impactful sport. It's not about kicking 10 barrels of, well, punching 10 barrels of whatever out of each other. It's about so much more that we get as individuals from this sport and going on a journey of improvement and self-development, that the byproducts will be a better physique for in many cases, but it will also improving our mental well-being, improving our physical mental well-being. So James, just for us to do the last question, I just want to just recap for listeners. We've talked about this social element. We've talked about balance. James talked about how it's balanced for nutrition, balanced in everything that we do, that no foods are sins if they're eaten in balance with other things. We've talked about performance, creative expression, all these things that we get from this world. James, if I was to ask you one last question, let's imagine you're at a press conference and you want to communicate to the working world about the benefits of boxing. You've got, say, 30 seconds to tell everyone why they could, if they want to improve their mental health, why boxing might be an avenue to explore. What would you say?
First, it's a safe place. You will only be supported and encouraged. You will be around great people, and you can be at a punch bag with a police officer one side to you and a solicitor the next side to you, and somebody really struggling with a mental health. There is no judgment, no egos, and it allows you to learn skills. It allows you to raise your endorphins, which is really important, get your heart rate up, get some stress out, and you will always leave in a far, far more positive way than what you started.
Nice one, James. Thank you. And I can to add to what James said, that I've never left the days when I've gone into the gym thinking, can I be bothered tonight? I could say 100% of the time I've left feeling so pleased that I went there. The social connections, the banter, improving my skill set, working hard. 100% of the time I come out of that gym thinking, I'm so glad I went. And actually, the times when I have gone and I've really not wanted to go are the sessions that I've had that have been the best and the most rewarding. So James,
you never regret any workout, and exercise is probably one of the most underprescribed forms of medication.
100%, 100%. And so hopefully for everyone who's listening, this idea that, you know, when it comes to our mental well-being, thinking holistically, as James has been talking about today, we've talked about sleep, nutrition, exercise, social connection, meaning, progression, all of these things that can bring so much to our lives. So James, I want to thank you. Can you tell my listeners where they can find out more about yourself and about the Frank Bruno Foundation?
Yes, we have the website, which is a general website, the frankbrunofoundation.co.uk. On social media, because we're shortly opening our second service in Oxford soon. If you follow us at the Frank Bruno Foundation Northampton, you will really get an understanding of what we do here. And if anybody ever wants to come swing by, have a look at what we do, the door's always open.
Brilliant. It's been a really engaging conversation, James. Everyone who's listening, I hope you've enjoyed speaking to James, listening to James as much as I have today. It's been a really, really great conversation. I'll look forward to speaking to you all soon. James, I want to thank you for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on board. Thank you.
Cheers, James. Thank you, everybody. Catch you all soon. Bye-bye.